The late afternoon sun bathed the neighborhood in warm, golden light, casting long shadows over the neatly trimmed lawns and perfectly arranged flower beds of Oak Ridge Estates. Birds chirped from the branches of towering oaks, their melodies weaving through the gentle rustling of leaves. The air smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass and barbecue smoke drifting from a few houses down. It was the kind of serene, picturesque suburb that seemed straight out of a magazine, until she arrived. Jake was kneeling in his backyard, wiping sweat from his brow as he patted down the soil around a newly planted row of marigolds. His 5-year-old daughter Lily sat nearby, her tiny hands busily arranging a pile of colorful pebbles into a heart shape. For the first time in days, Jake felt at peace. The backyard project had been a labor of love, a personal mission to create a space where he and Lily could unwind together. It was a work in progress, but it was coming along beautifully. Then came the voice. "Excuse me, but what is this disaster supposed to be?" Jake sighed before turning. He already knew who it was. Karen stood at the edge of his yard, arms folded, her expression one of barely contained disgust. Her short, bottle-blonde hair was styled into an immaculate bob, her expensive sunglasses perched atop her head as if she were the queen of the cul-de-sac. The HOA president of Oak Ridge Estates, she considered herself the law of the land, patrolling the streets with clipboard in hand, always searching for her next victim. Jake dusted off his hands and stood. "It's called landscaping, Karen. You should try it sometime." Karen's lips pursed. "Landscaping? This looks like a junkyard. Piles of dirt, scattered tools. This is unacceptable." She pulled out her phone and snapped a picture. "You're in direct violation of HOA regulations." He crossed his arms. "I checked the handbook. There's nothing about temporary yard work being against the rules." Karen's eyes narrowed. "It's about aesthetic standards, Jake. We can't have the neighborhood looking like a construction zone. I've had multiple complaints from concerned residents." Jake highly doubted that. No one in the neighborhood liked Karen. She wielded HOA rules like a dictator, doling out fines for minor infractions while conveniently ignoring her own. "I'm almost done," he said, forcing a calm tone. "Give it a week and it'll look better than ever." "A week?" She scoffed. "I don't think so. This needs to be fixed immediately, or I'll be forced to issue a formal complaint. That means fines. Multiple fines." Jake felt his jaw tighten. He wasn't one for unnecessary conflict, but he also wasn't about to let this woman dictate what he could and couldn't do with his own yard. "Go ahead," he said coolly. "Waste your time." Karen's eyes flickered with annoyance, but she simply gave him a smug smile. "You should know better than to test me, Jake. You might regret it." With that, she turned on her heel and marched off, her heels clicking against the pavement. Jake exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. He had dealt with Karen before, everyone had, but she seemed particularly fixated on him lately. Maybe it was because he was a single father, an easy target in her eyes. Or maybe it was just because she thrived on making other people miserable. Lily looked up at him. "Daddy, is the mean lady mad again?" Jake smiled and knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Don't worry, sweetheart. She's just grumpy because she doesn't have anything better to do." Lily giggled, going back to arranging her pebbles. Jake wished he could brush it off as easily as his daughter, but something about Karen's parting words left him unsettled. The next few days passed without incident, until the knock came. Jake had just gotten home from work, loosening his tie as he stepped inside, when the sharp rapping at the door made him freeze. The sound wasn't casual. It was firm, official. A shiver of unease crept up his spine. He opened the door to find two strangers standing on his porch. A man and a woman, both dressed in business casual attire, their expressions unreadable but serious. "Mr. Reynolds?" the woman asked. "Yeah." She offered a tight smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're with Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous complaint regarding the safety of your daughter." Jake's stomach dropped. His pulse pounded in his ears as he forced himself to speak. "I what? A complaint?" The man nodded. "Yes, sir. We're here to conduct a routine welfare check." For a second, Jake couldn't breathe. The sheer absurdity of the situation had his mind reeling. Lily? Unsafe? The thought was laughable, except nothing about this was funny. Someone had reported him to CPS. Someone had tried to paint him as an unfit parent. And he had a sinking feeling he knew exactly who that someone was. His fingers curled into fists, but he swallowed his anger. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The two social workers entered, glancing around as they took in the modest but well-kept home. The living room was tidy, the kitchen spotless. Lily's toys were neatly stored in a basket by the couch. Everything was exactly as it should be. "Lily," Jake called, trying to keep his voice even. "Come here for a second, sweetheart." Lily trotted in, her curly hair bouncing as she smiled up at the visitors. "Hi." The woman crouched to her level. "Hi there, Lily. I just wanted to ask you a few questions, is that okay?" Lily nodded, completely unfazed. As the social worker spoke to his daughter, asking basic questions about her home life, Jake could only stand there, seething. This wasn't just a power play. This was an attack. 15 minutes later, after a thorough inspection of the house and Lily's cheerful, oblivious responses, the social workers exchanged glances. The man turned to Jake. "We don't see any concerns here." The woman nodded. "We apologize for the inconvenience. We have to follow up on all reports, but there's nothing to indicate Lily is in any danger. Everything looks fine." Jake exhaled, his muscles unclenching. "I understand. Thanks for being thorough." They left soon after, but the moment the door shut, Jake let out a slow, simmering breath. Then he looked outside. Across the street, Karen stood by her mailbox, watching. When she caught his eyes, she smiled. A small, knowing smirk. And then she waved. Jake's vision blurred with rage. Karen hadn't just crossed a line, she had obliterated it. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. She had tried to take his daughter away. And that was unforgivable. Jake stepped back inside, his heart hammering with a new kind of resolve. Karen thought she was untouchable. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The next morning, Jake stood at his kitchen counter, staring into the depths of his coffee as if the answers to his problems lay within. His hands clenched the ceramic mug, the warmth doing little to soothe the icy fury settling in his bones. Across the street, Karen was likely already up, patrolling the neighborhood with her smug little smirk, basking in the chaos she had unleashed. She thought she had won. Jake had spent the night replaying the CPS visit over and over again. The implication that he was anything less than a devoted father had burned him to his core. That woman had tried to use the system against him, had tried to paint him as unfit, all because of a few bags of soil and a project she didn't approve of. He wasn't just angry, he was done. A quiet voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Daddy?" Lily stood in the doorway, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, her tiny frame swallowed by her favorite pink pajamas. His heart clenched at the sight of her, so innocent, so blissfully unaware of the war brewing just outside their doorstep. Jake forced a smile. "Morning, sweetheart. Want some pancakes?" She grinned, nodding eagerly. He set to work flipping pancakes, pouring syrup over the golden stacks as Lily happily chattered about her dreams. For her, today was just another day. But for Jake, it was the beginning of something else entirely. He wasn't just going to fight back. He was going to end this. After dropping Lily off at preschool, Jake parked his truck a few streets away from home and pulled out his phone. Karen wanted to play dirty, fine. But she had made one fatal mistake, she assumed she was untouchable. Jake spent the next few hours digging. It started small, HOA meeting minutes, social media accounts, old neighborhood emails. Then he found something interesting. Karen had a habit of enforcing rules on others, but she wasn't quite as good at following them herself. It turned out the HOA had strict guidelines about using community funds. Karen, as president, had access to those accounts. And based on a few discrepancies in spending records, it looked like she'd been dipping into them liberally. New patio furniture for her backyard? HOA funded. An expensive security system? HOA covered. A landscaping crew for her own lawn while she handed out fines for untidy yards? Paid for with everyone else's money. Jake whistled low under his breath. This was gold. But he wasn't done. A little more digging and he found a name, Karen's ex-husband. A man who, according to public records, had sued her for full custody of their 2 children years ago. And won. Jake leaned back, piecing it together. Karen was always alone. Everyone assumed she was just divorced, but no one ever saw her kids. Because she didn't have them. Not only had her ex gotten full custody, but she had been deemed an unfit parent. The court documents were sealed, but Jake didn't need details to know that it took a lot for a mother to lose custody like that. His jaw tightened. This woman had called CPS on him. She had tried to rip his daughter from his arms, all while her own kids had been taken away. The sheer hypocrisy was almost laughable. Almost. Now he had leverage. Jake spent the rest of the afternoon setting his plan into motion. It started with a few well-placed anonymous tips to local news outlets about the misuse of HOA funds. He attached copies of the records, highlighting every shady transaction Karen had authorized. Then he sent an email to the HOA board, carefully worded but damning. Subject * urgent concern regarding HOA finances. Dear board members, I am writing to bring attention to some troubling discrepancies in our HOA's financial records. It appears that funds have been used for personal expenses that do not benefit the community. I have attached detailed documentation outlining these concerns. Given the nature of these transactions, I believe a formal audit is necessary. Sincerely, a concerned homeowner. It wouldn't take long for the board to react. The second they realized their own money was being mishandled, they'd turn on Karen like a pack of wolves. But the final blow? That one would be personal. Jake waited until evening when he knew Karen would be outside before making his move. He stepped onto his porch just as she emerged from her house, mail in hand. Their eyes met and he saw it, the smug satisfaction she still carried. The belief that she had won. Jake smiled. Not friendly. Not warm. Just enough to unnerve her. Karen hesitated, tilting her head. Something funny? Not really, Jake said, crossing his arms. I just think it's interesting. Her brows furrowed. What is? He took a slow step forward, watching as she instinctively stiffened. I had some time today, he said casually. Did a little research. Turns out you've been very busy, Karen. Her smile wavered. I have no idea what you're talking about. Jake chuckled. That's funny. Because the HOA board is probably very interested in how their money has been funding your personal home improvements. Her face paled. And CPS? He let the words hang in the air, watching as she swallowed hard. They might find it fascinating that someone with your history had the audacity to call them on someone else. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time she looked afraid. Jake leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You tried to take my daughter away. That was your mistake. But see now. Now, everyone's going to know exactly who you are. Karen's hands clenched around the stack of mail she held. You. But whatever she was about to say was cut off by the sound of a car pulling up. Two men in suits stepped out, HOA board members. Karen, one of them called, his expression tight. We need to talk. Jake stepped back, watching as her world began to unravel. This was only the beginning. Karen's face remained frozen in a tight mask of denial, but the flicker of panic in her eyes was unmistakable. She held her ground as the two HOA board members approached, their expressions sharp with quiet fury. Karen, the taller of the two men, a graying, broad-shouldered figure named Richard, said, We need to discuss some concerning financial irregularities. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it carried the force of an executioner's blade. The other man, a wiry, sharp-eyed member named Alan, crossed his arms. We received an anonymous tip, along with documented proof that HOA funds have been misused for personal expenses. I'm assuming you'd like to explain that? Karen let out a brittle laugh, shifting the stack of mail in her hands as though it were a shield. This is ridiculous, she snapped. I don't know who's been spreading lies, but I have always followed HOA protocol. Jake smirked, leaning casually against his porch railing. He wasn't part of this conversation, not yet, but he was going to enjoy every second of it. Alan glanced at his phone, scrolling through something. Interesting, he murmured. Because we cross-referenced the receipts, Karen. Home security systems, patio furniture, lawn services, all charged to the HOA's account. He lifted his gaze. These aren't community expenses. They're yours. Karen's composure cracked, her grip on her mail tightening until the edges of the envelopes crumpled. I authorized those purchases because they contributed to the overall value of the neighborhood. A well-maintained home sets a precedent for the rest of the community. Richard sighed, rubbing his temples. Karen, this isn't a debate. We've already scheduled an emergency board meeting for tomorrow evening. You'll be expected to attend and provide proof that these expenses were legitimate. He shot her a hard look. If you can't, there will be consequences. Jake didn't miss the way Karen's breath hitched at the word consequences. Alan tucked his phone away. Oh, and just so you know, Karen, we've also reached out to the HOA's legal counsel. His smile was razor-sharp. Just in case. For the first time since Jake had known her, Karen looked cornered. Her eyes darted toward him, filled with accusation, but Jake only shrugged. She'd started this war. He was just making sure she lost. The board members left, their footsteps heavy with purpose, and Karen stood motionless in her driveway, her face pale beneath the glow of the setting sun. Then, without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed back inside her house. Jake exhaled slowly. She was rattled, but she wasn't defeated yet. People like Karen didn't go down quietly, They clawed their way to the bitter end. The thought made him uneasy. Later that evening, as Jake settled Lily into bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. His gut told him Karen wasn't done being dangerous. And he was right. The next morning the storm hit. Jake had just stepped outside to grab the mail when he noticed the first sign of trouble. A white sedan parked 2 houses down. The moment he looked in its direction, the engine roared to life and the car sped off. His stomach twisted. That wasn't a coincidence. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You think you've won? Watch your back. Asterisk asterisk." Jake's blood turned to ice. He looked up, scanning the street. The neighborhood seemed normal. People watering their lawns, kids riding bikes, a jogger making his way down the sidewalk. But beneath the surface he could feel it. Something was coming. And Karen was behind it. Jake's fingers tightened around his phone as he read the text again. The weight of the words coiled in his gut like a tightening knot. Watch your back. A warning. A threat. A desperate move from someone who knew they were losing. Karen wasn't finished. He exhaled sharply, scanning the street. The white sedan was long gone, but the unease it left in its wake lingered like a shadow. He had expected retaliation, but this was different. It wasn't just Karen flexing her HOA authority, this was something darker. He had no proof she had sent the message, but he didn't need it. He knew. Steeling himself, he went inside, locking the door behind him. He needed to be smart. Needed to be patient. She had played her hand, and now, all he had to do was wait for the perfect moment to strike back. It came sooner than expected. That evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, a sharp knock echoed through his house. Jake set down his drink, muscles tensing. He approached the door, peering through the peephole. 2 police officers stood on his porch. His heart pounded. He opened the door, keeping his expression neutral. "Evening, officers. Something I can help you with?" The taller of the 2, a serious-looking man with deep-set eyes, cleared his throat. "Sir, we received an anonymous call about a potential situation involving your daughter." Jake's blood ran cold. Another CPS call. Karen had doubled down. He forced himself to remain calm, gripping the doorframe to steady himself. "I see. Well, as you can tell, my daughter is safe and sound." He gestured inside. Lily sat at the dining table, humming as she colored, completely oblivious to the storm outside. The second officer, a woman with sharp eyes, studied him carefully. "Would you mind if we stepped inside for a moment? Just to verify." Jake wanted to scream. To rage. But instead he stepped aside, his smile tight. "Of course." The officers moved through the house, checking each room, asking routine questions. Jake answered them all, his voice measured. They found nothing. There was nothing to find. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they exchanged a glance. "I'm sorry for the intrusion, Mr. Carter," the woman said. "This is the second report we've received about your home, and neither had any merit. Given that, we'll be noting it in our system. If another false report comes through, CPS will likely investigate the caller rather than you." Jake's chest tightened. The caller. Karen. The officers left, and Jake stood in the doorway watching them go. The night air was thick, heavy with the promise of something inevitable. He took a slow breath. Enough was enough. The next day he made his final move. The HOA meeting was packed. Homeowners filled every seat, murmuring amongst themselves, the tension electric. Karen sat at the front, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the crowd with barely concealed nerves. Jake leaned against the back wall, arms crossed. He didn't need to speak first. The evidence was already in motion. Richard, the HOA board member, stood. "We've reviewed the financial records, and it's clear that funds were misused. Effective immediately, Karen will be removed as HOA president, pending legal review." A ripple of shock and satisfaction passed through the room. Karen's face twisted, her mouth opening and closing, searching for words that wouldn't come. But Jake wasn't done. He stepped forward. "Before we wrap up, I think there's something else we need to address." His voice was even, but it carried weight. "Someone in this community has been weaponizing CPS to harass their neighbors. Not once, but twice." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Jake's eyes locked onto Karen's. The color drained from her face. "I don't know about the rest of you," he continued, "but I take false CPS reports pretty damn seriously. And it just so happens that if someone repeatedly files false claims, they become the subject of an investigation." Silence. Then Richard cleared his throat. "I think that warrants a police report." Jake nodded. "Already filed." Karen shot to her feet. "This is insane. You can't just accuse me." Oh, but I can, Jake cut in smoothly. And so can the officers who just flagged your reports as fraudulent. And guess what? If CPS starts looking into you, they'll find something very interesting about your past. Karen swayed slightly, gripping the table. She knew. The room was deathly quiet. Then Alan, the other board member, sighed. I think it's best if Karen steps down from all HOA involvement. Permanently. And just like that, it was over. Karen stumbled out of the room, her face drawn and pale. The moment she disappeared, the tension snapped, conversation erupting around them. Jake exhaled, feeling the weight lift from his chest. Justice. The next morning, as he sipped his coffee, he spotted a moving truck in front of Karen's house. She wasn't just leaving the HOA. She was leaving for good. Jake smiled.